All right, let's dive right in. Welcome to today's Explainer, where we're going to decode an absolute masterclass in wealth creation, power, and global brand dominance. You know, in a world that is just utterly obsessed with overnight crypto millionaires and flashy tech empires, one guy took a completely different path. He didn't invent an app, he didn't code a single line of software, yet he built an empire so insanely massive that he literally dethroned tech titans like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos to become the richest human being on planet Earth. $200 billion. Let that sink in for a second. And this staggering fortune wasn't built on silicon chips, algorithms, or massive server farms. It was built entirely on luxury. The media calls him the wolf in Cashmere, and his name is Bernard Arnault. So how exactly did a quiet engineer from northern France build a non-tech fortune of this magnitude from absolute scratch? What were the actual calculated formulas he used? Well, let's trace it all the way back to the very beginning. Chapter 1. The Epiphany. By all standard metrics, his life was pretty much set. Born into a comfortable, middle-class family in France, he was a trained engineer expected to just quietly take over his dad's modest construction business. But Arnault had this relentless vision. Back in the early 1970s, he takes a trip to the US and hops into a New York City taxi. He strikes up a casual conversation and asks the cabbie a really simple question. Do you know who the president of France is? The driver's response was legendary. He said no, but I know Christian Dior. That single throwaway sentence hit Arnault like a lightning bolt. This was his massive light bulb moment. Think about it. Politicians, they come and go. Construction projects eventually crumble into dust. But an iconic brand, it transcends borders, time, and culture. It takes up premium emotional real estate in people's minds. Arnault realized right then and there that true infinite wealth doesn't come from selling commodities, which always have a ceiling. It comes from selling desire, and desire scales infinitely better. Chapter 2. The First Strike. Fast forward to 1984. France is facing some serious economic uncertainty, and there's this massive textile conglomerate named Bussac that is just bleeding millions of dollars every single month. It was a failing monster, heading straight for bankruptcy. But buried deep inside this dying corporate giant was one single shining gem, Christian Dior. Now, the French government was desperate for someone to step in and save Bussac's thousands of jobs. Traditional investors, they took one look at the mountain of debt and ran for the hills. But where everyone else saw a sinking ship, Arnault saw an empire. Using a $15 million family stake and an $80 million loan, a 35-year-old Arnault buys Bussac. But here's the thing, he wasn't playing some emotional game to save jobs. Within 2 years, he ruthlessly fires over 9,000 workers. He liquidates almost everything. The diaper units, the cheap textile mills, the whole shebang. He keeps only Dior and a department store. Arnault operated on a brutal, yet undeniably effective principle. To build a skyscraper, you must first clear the debris. The French media was absolutely outraged. They branded him the wolf in Cashmere, basically calling him a ruthless corporate raider in an elegant suit. But honestly, Arnault didn't care. By stripping away all that dead weight, he turned a dying investment into a hyper-profitable machine. Chapter 3. The Ultimate Heist. So, with Christian Dior firmly in his pocket, Arnault turns his attention to the absolute apex of French luxury, LVMH. It was this newly emerged giant formed by Louis Vuitton and Moet Hennessy. But instead of being a unified powerhouse, it was tearing itself apart. There was a bitter internal civil war raging between its two CEOs who were constantly fighting over control. In 1987, the Louis Vuitton CEO actually invites Arnault to invest as an ally. Huge mistake. Arnault secretly flips and allies with the Moet Hennessy side to oust the guy who invited him in. Then, during the 1987 stock market crash, while share prices are at rock bottom and the founders are busy fighting each other in the media, Arnault quietly goes on a shopping spree, amassing massive amounts of LVMH stock. By 1989, he executes a totally ruthless hostile takeover, kicks out both original CEOs, and by age 40, crowns himself the supreme ruler of the world's largest luxury conglomerate. Just wild. Chapter 4. The Arnault Luxury Paradox. Okay, so now he owns the throne. But buying up brands is one thing, scaling them into a massive 75-house empire without losing that exclusive magical feel, that is entirely different. So how did he pull it off? He basically invented a completely unique playbook. He built this on 4 distinct pillars, the exact formulas he used to scale LVMH. We call this the Arnault Luxury Paradox. let's unpack these, because this right here is where the real multi-billion-dollar magic happens. Pillar 1, mixing timelessness with modernity. Look, Arnault knew that heritage alone is just boring. It quickly turns a brand into a dusty museum piece. So to keep 150-year-old craftsmanship alive and kicking, he hires these radical, streetwear-focused creative directors. We're talking absolute visionaries like Virgil Abloh and Marc Jacobs. He essentially gave them the keys to clash edgy street culture with historical luxury, making these legacy brands incredibly cool and highly desirable to younger generations. Moving on to Pillar 2, complete supply chain control. LVMH straight up refuses to do mass distribution. You will never, ever find authentic Louis Vuitton heavily discounted on Amazon or sitting in some outlet mall. No way. They own the leather tanneries, they employ the artisans, they run the flagship stores, and they completely control the final price tag. By locking down the entire process, LVMH creates this absolute artificial scarcity. Then we have Pillar 3, strategic brand categorization. Arnault basically breaks his massive empire down into two groups. First, you've got the cash cows or star brands. Think Louis Vuitton and Hennessy. These guys generate massive profit margins, often way over 40%. He then takes that immense river of cash and patiently uses it to fund the rising stars. These are the struggling legacy brands he buys up and slowly turns around over a 10 to 20-year period. It's a very long, very patient game he's playing. And finally, Pillar 4, pricing power. This one is fascinating. When inflation hits, most businesses absolutely panic. They freeze prices so they don't scare off their customers, right? Well, LVMH does the exact opposite. When inflation goes up, LVMH raises their prices even higher. Why? Because they understand the counterintuitive psychology of the ultra-rich. A $3,000 bag is just a product. But a $10,000 bag, that is a status symbol. Bumping up the price actually increases the prestige and the desire. It's brilliant. Chapter 5, expanding the global monopoly. Armed with this incredible playbook, Arnault goes on this relentless shopping spree throughout the 90s and 2000s that was just unlike anything the business world had ever seen. When he wanted Italian elegance, he bought Fendi. For high-end jewelry, he snatched up Bulgari. To conquer beauty retail, he completely transformed Sephora into a global giant. But his most staggering move, that came in 2021, literally right in the middle of a global pandemic. Arnault pulled off the largest luxury buyout in human history, acquiring the iconic American jeweler Tiffany Co for $15.8 billion. And true to his cashmere wolf reputation, even with global markets in total chaos, he still ruthlessly negotiated that price down by hundreds of millions of dollars before finally closing the deal. Afterward, LVMH completely revamped the brand, brought in Beyoncé and Jay-Z, and pushed sales to absolute record highs. Chapter 6, Lessons for Building Wealth. Now, this isn't just some interesting story about a billionaire in France. This is a masterclass in multi-billion-dollar discipline that you can actually apply to your own journey, whether you're working with $100 or 100 million. Let's translate Arnault's strategy into some real actionable takeaways for us. First, look for unleveraged assets. Notice he didn't start from zero. He found mismatched equity that had an existing history, and he just went in and fixed the operations. Second, emotion drives margin. You got to stop competing on just the utility of a product. Instead, sell an identity and a story that people actually want to align themselves with. Third, long-term capital always wins. Arnault thinks in decades to build infrastructure, not just financial quarters. Short-term thinkers chase trends, long-term thinkers build empires. And finally, ruthless discipline. Never, ever mistake an elegant product for an easy business. On the outside, LVMH is this beautiful, glamorous world of art, fashion, and champagne. But on the inside, it is a cold, aggressive corporate machine built on relentless financial discipline, strict inventory control, and absolutely aggressive negotiation tactics. Bernard Arnault proved that you don't necessarily need to invent the future to master it. Sometimes you literally just need to spot what is timeless and execute on it better than anyone else on Earth. So I'm going to leave you with this question to ponder. Which of these strategies surprised you the most? Was it the absolutely ruthless hostile takeover of LVMH? Or was it that brilliantly counterintuitive pricing psychology? Think about how you can apply these masterstrokes to your own path. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning.